Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and today I'm very excited to do my very first tier ranking video here on Halloween Year Round. So, as I'm sure you guys know and the whole internet knows, Beetlejuice is out right now. It's extremely popular. I had a lot of fun with it. I definitely had some strong opinions about it, which I did a whole video on that I'll link in the description too. I'll get into it a little more when I talk about it for this list, but I'll spare you that now. So I knew when it came out that I wanted to kind of go back and revisit, well, Tim Burton. He's a director that I grew up being a fan of. I remember watching the original Beetlejuice as a kid. You know, I'm a huge Batman fan, other than my horror fandom. I'm a big, DC fan. DC beats Marvel, fight me. And I'm not talking about the newer movies. I mean, like, overall in their decades-long history. Anyways, I've always been a fan of his movies, and I thought with the release of Beetlejuice, I wanted to do something special. I knew I wanted to rank all of his movies, but I love them. I love so many of them, and they're so unique and different. It was hard for me to kind of numerically rank them like I would anything else. And there's also so many of them. Beetlejuice is his 20th theatrical movie. So yeah. As a result, I thought doing it as a tier system might be a little bit easier way to do it. Plus, I can kind of go through his filmography chronologically from the beginning, to now. So in preparation for this, for the past 3 weeks before Beetlejuice came out, I know I keep saying Beetlejuice and he's bound to appear. I went back and rewatched every single Tim Burton movie, all 19 previous ones, plus Wednesday season 1. As a huge fan of his, I'm proud to say that there was only one I had not actually seen before. There was only one movie that was a first-time watch for me in doing the prep for this video, and that was actually his first theatrical movie, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which I feel weird because I grew up, I was a fan of Pee Wee Herman. I used to watch Pee-wee's Playhouse when I was a kid. I just never got around to seeing the movie, and, well, I'll get into my thoughts on that when I get to that. So, ground rules. I am only counting movies Tim Burton directed. Sorry for all you Jack Skellington Nightmare Before Christmas fans, as the whole internet has been screaming for the past decade. No, Tim Burton did not direct that movie. Yes, his fingerprints and his signature style is all over it, but you know whose other signature style is all over it? The movie's actual director, Henry Selick, who does not get enough credit. And if you've seen James and the Giant Peach, and you've seen Coraline, you know what I'm talking about. So, I'm not going to be discussing Nightmare Before Christmas. And after much consideration, I did decide I would include Wednesday Season 1, because I know, I was really on the fence about this. What ultimately landed me on the decision to include it was, number one, Tim Burton did direct 4 out of the 8 episodes, so he himself directed the first half of the season. And 2, he was the showrunner. So, I'm okay. I know technically he didn't direct Nightmare Before Christmas, but being that he did direct half the episodes and was showrunner for the entire season, I'm comfortable ranking Wednesday along with Tim Burton's other work and calling that like a Tim Burton, project. So, without further ado, let's jump right in by going all the way back in time. So here you have it, my very first tier ranking. Real quick, just want to go over the categories. So we have, at the very top, GOAT, greatest of all time. One of my rules is I feel like only one movie should go in there. I'm going to kind of, as I go through it, if I feel like a movie deserves to be there, I'll put it there. And then if another movie I think kind of dethrones it, I'm okay switching it out so long as only one movie is in that category. Down here, we've got Masterpiece. These are your ones that you think, they're the ones that almost could be GOAT, but not quite. Again, I only want maybe 2 in there because I feel like my top 3 are going to be those spots. Down here, we have Classic Burton. These are ones that I love. They were part of my childhood. When I think best Tim Burton movies, these are the ones that always come to mind. They're just, they're not quite above the grade as the Masterpiece and the GOAT are. Down here, we have I like it, but don't love it. So those are for the ones that, it's pretty self-explanatory. I have issues with, but I can't say that I don't like those movies. To the contrary, down here we have I don't hate it, but again, pretty self explanatory. I don't outright hate any of these movies except for maybe the one or two at the very, very bottom. So this category is going to be for movies that I feel like have major issues, but there's parts in it I like enough to warrant, to be above the bottom category, which is, of course, what are you doing, Tim? Like, seriously, what are you doing? So now that we have our categories out of the way, we have his filmography: 20 feature films and one season of a TV show. Real quick, just for fun, I calculated a few what I think are interesting Tim Burton statistics. So, out of his 20 movies, in terms of studio, 9 are with Warner Brothers, 4 are with Disney, 3 are with Fox, 2 are with Paramount, 1 is with Columbia, and regrettably, 1 is with the Weinstein Company, which is unfortunate because I really like that movie and I hate seeing those names every time I watch it. As far as his 20 films go, 7 are adaptations, 5 are remakes, or should I say reimaginings, as that's his preferred word, 4 are original movies, 2 are biopics, and 2 are sequels. Now, for these, I was kind of loose with how I define them. Obviously, anything that's a sequel. Yes, Batman Returns is technically also an adaptation, but I'm counting it more as a sequel. Yes, things like Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie are based on previous works of Burton. They're adaptations of his own work, but because it's his own work, I'm still counting those as original movie ideas he had. So now that we have all of our fun statistics out of the way, I know you math nerds out there eat that up. Let's get to the rankings. So we are going back to the very beginning, as Hilary Duff once said, with Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Mind you, this is the only movie on this list that I had not already seen, was not already a fan of. So I feel weird putting it on here, but it's gonna go in. I like it, but I don't love it. And here's why. I think had I grown up with it and had the nostalgia been there, it probably would have affected me more than it would watching it for the first time as, an adult. I love Paul Rubens in it. I love the whole Large March sequence. The Alamo scene's a lot of fun. It has all the elements in it, and I love that you start to see kind of Burton coming into his own with his style. But it just didn't do it for me the way that I think it would have had I seen it earlier. So if this is your favorite movie, don't hate me. It's not that I don't like it. It's so much fun. It's just that I don't quite love it. Moving on to, of course, 1988 and Beetlejuice. Not twice, just once. It's the original. What a weird movie to even come out back then. Just imagine trying to pitch this movie. It's like a reverse Ghostbusters, and the guy who's exorcising the humans is this weird, insane, over the top pervert played by Michael Keaton, just going 110%, hamming it up and having so much fun. I gotta go with it's classic Burton. It's one of the ones that you think iconic Tim Burton movie, you think Tim Burton style. This is him creating that style, the weird stop motion, the dark, weird color scheme, the kind of social satire about yuppie rich know-it-alls and the outcast. This is sort of all of that coming together. Moving on, I will admit I am extremely biased about this movie and then its sequel. I'm a huge Batman fan. If I was not, other than being a horror fan, I would say my second biggest fandom is for Batman. So I'm extremely biased when I say this, but I gotta put it in masterpiece. And I know that probably everyone's gonna agree with it, but then you're not gonna like what I do later with it. So stay tuned. But real quick about this movie, I mean, if Richard Donner set the tone for what a superhero movie could do, Tim Burton showed that you could make it dark, creepy, mysterious, with his Batman. The world wasn't sold on Michael Keaton, and why should they be? But in hindsight, I think I actually like his Bruce Wayne more than I do his Batman, because you get the sense that this is a man that could just as easily go insane like the Joker, and there's not a whole lot keeping him from doing that. Moving on, Edward Scissorhands. I know it's early in the video. I know that I probably shouldn't be doing this so soon, but I'm putting it up here in GOAT, greatest of all time. After I told you, I rewatched every single one of these movies in preparation to do this video, and Edward Scissorhands, it just, it's so poignant. It touched me in a way that Edward couldn't do because of his scissor hands. But if you're gonna talk about the epitome of everything that is Burton, sort of the social satire about suburbia, championing, the outcast, Edward is his perfect protagonist, made for a world that is not ours, reflective of the director himself, having to deal with the struggles of, do I conform to be normal, or do I stand out and be my own person? Plus, as much as I love Danny Elfman's themes, with Batman or Mars Attacks or Beetlejuice or any other movies on this list, there are none so just beautiful as his theme for Edward Scissorhands. The ice dance scene with Edward and Winona Ryder is perhaps one of the most beautiful scenes I have ever seen in a movie. It almost brings a tear to my inhuman, psychotic, sociopath eyes. And the fact that it can do that is nothing short of amazing. Moving on, Batman Returns. Remember I said I'd come back to this? So you're probably not going to like what I do, but I gotta put this one up in Masterpiece, and as a result, I gotta bump this one down. If for no other reason than both of these movies are equally deserving of the term masterpiece. The only reason I put the Batman 89 down in Classic Burton is because Batman Returns, I think, is the better movie. Hear me out. Hear me out. If this was just a Batman ranking, Batman 89 would be above Batman Returns. But this is a Tim Burton ranking, and I think Batman Returns is the better Tim Burton movie. It was him completely free of the studio constraints to just go as weird and Tim Burton, and again, hauntingly beautiful, poignant, and tragic. They take a character like the Penguin, who's about to murder all the children of Gotham, and then, well, everyone, and you feel such, not sympathy for, but like, you mourn what his life could have been, that he never had a chance. And even though he does these despicable things, you can't help but feel for him in his tragic final moments, especially when, the Penguin pallbearers carry him down. So it is for that reason I gotta put Batman Returns up in Masterpiece, and I gotta bump that one down just to differentiate that I like that one better than that one. But don't come at me in the comments, or do. Next up, uh, I know I'm going to wear out this category sooner than I think, but I got to be honest. Ed Wood, it's an underrated masterpiece. It is, again, everything I said about Edward Scissorhands, in that it's about the underdog, the outcast. Ed Wood embodies and does so as a biopic. No, it's not completely historically accurate to the life of Ed Wood and the details of, him and Bela Lugosi and Plan 9 and Bela Lugosi's funeral and all that. But it captures the spirit of it, so much so that Ed Wood's widow was on set and saw Johnny Depp and was like, "That's my Ed." Speaking of which, we are now 2 movies into what I'm calling the Johnny Depp era. And we're going to kind of see a few more eras. This is also the era that Tim Burton is dating Lisa Marie. She played Vampira in the movie, and that's going to be an important detail as we get later on in the chronology. So, moving on. Mars Attacks. This is an easy classic Burton. I love this movie. I saw it in the theaters. just the older I get, the more I kind of appreciate it. When I saw it in theaters, I was 7 years old, and my first thought back then was, "Oh, they're ripping off Independence Day." My feeble 7-year-old mind didn't realize that, first of all, two studios can be working on two alien movies at the same time without knowledge of each other or talking to each other. But the older I get, the funnier this movie gets. Again, with its scathing satire of just how human society and culture is from the point of view of the aliens. There's so many moments in here that are dark and disturbing, but kind of hilarious. And the fact that he has the balls to cast so many big names. You got Jack Nicholson, you've got Glenn Close, you've got Danny DeVito, um, you've got Pierce Brosnan, you've got Sarah Jessica Parker, you've got Michael J. Fox. You're just throwing as many stars at the wall as you can. And he's having the aliens kill them all, except for Tom Jones. Because of course he's Tom Jones, he's playing himself. And I know I said Edward Scissorhands was the most beautiful and my favorite kind of Danny Elfman Tim Burton score. This is probably my second favorite above Batman because it is just so damn catchy and just captures that like 50s sci-fi era. That's another thing I love with this movie is despite it being set and released in the 90s, all the military technology is 50s. And that was kind of the point. It was meant to be like it's a B movie. It's supposed to be a B movie, but it kind of elevates up. It's better. It's an A B movie, if that makes any sense at all, and if I'm not just rambling. Moving on, Sleepy Hollow. I really like Sleepy Hollow, and again, not to. I don't mean for this list to like be all at the top now, and then we'll see what happens later. But I gotta be honest, and this is how I feel. I really, really like Sleepy Hollow. The only thing I don't like about it is I'm not a fan of how the Headless Horseman is kind of just like a henchman being used by someone else. That being said, I love its aesthetic. I love its kind of bleak take on colonial America, well, post colonial. I love Johnny Depp again as this like weird, like sciency, Ichabod Crane. I love that he plays him like a coward, and it's funny to watch, and it's a cool murder mystery with an astounding cast that includes Christopher Lee, Ian McDermott, and Ray Park. You've got three Sith Lords right there. You've got Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman when he's a human, who's just creepy as hell. And I love how kind of bleak and colorless the movie is, except for the blood that's just bright, vibrant red, and it feels like Tim Burton's tribute. If Mars Attacks was his tribute to sci-fi B movies from the 50s, this is his tribute to Hammer movies from, well, the 50s and 60s, especially the fact that Christopher Lee's in it. So, now we come to our first remake. Sorry, Tim. Reimagining Planet of the Apes. It's got to go down here. I don't hate it, but Planet of the Apes is an example of where I think the behind the scenes is more interesting than the movie itself, and I'll tell you why. Remember I said this is the era, it's the Johnny Depp era, but it's also the Tim Burton is dating Lisa Marie era. So she's in Ed Wood, she's in Mars Attacks, and she's in Sleepy Hollow, and she's in Planet of the Apes. She's the one that has that weird ape sex scene with the guy that played Otho, which I'll get to that. This is also the movie where he meets Helena Bonham Carter because she's a main character in it. And then as soon as this movie comes out, he breaks up with Lisa Marie and immediately starts dating Helena Bonham Carter publicly. I'm not throwing out any accusations. Look, I wasn't there. I'm just saying that the timeline where Lisa Marie ends and Helena Bonham Carter begins is a little fuzzy. Again, I wasn't there. I'm not. Well, I am saying. I'm just saying it's interesting, and I'm sure the behind the scenes of this movie was a very interesting place to be because the movie itself, it's kind of dull. I mean, granted, it has by far the best design of the apes of any of the Planet of the Apes movies. I'm talking the original series and the newer, prequel series. And when I ranked this for that franchise, I kind of pointed out there that it's amazing what they did with the practical makeup. I just wish the story worked a little better, and I wish Mark Wahlberg wasn't so just wooden. And here's the thing, he's not a bad actor. Tim Burton's not a bad director. I just think that they don't mesh well, and Burton is not the right director to get the best performance out of Mark Wahlberg. That's just what I think. So, moving on. Big Fish. I gotta go with Masterpiece for this one. Just what a cool, again, classic Burton. It's less horror and more just fantasy whimsy. It's this weird story that you're not sure if any of it's true, but you're invested in these weird adventures that, Ewan McGregor and then later Albert Finney is telling you about. And kind of underneath all of it is this really touching, poignant story about generational gaps and how we reach a point in our lives when we realize our parents were human. And that's something that I've kind of been dealing with and thinking about a lot, especially now that I'm a parent to young children. It's kind of put me in that place where I think about, like, what were my parents thinking, or what was it like for them when they were my age and I was my children's age. And I think Big Fish, this was one that I'd only seen once when it first came out, like way back in 2003, but watching it again now, it really spoke to me. And it's just one that I hate using the term feel good, but it feels like a more creative and fantasy version of Forrest Gump without less contrived. So interpret that however you will. Moving on. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Okay, the only reason. All right, it's gonna go here. I thought about putting it, and I don't hate it, but the thing is, I don't even dislike this movie. I do like it. I'm not the biggest fan of Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka. I think that he is way too Michael Jackson. But I'm putting it in I like it but don't love it, simply because I do love every single song in this, and I love the visuals of it. I think this is where Tim Burton really thrives in, again, a remake or reimagining, in that he's able to use his fantasy style and visuals to bring Roald Dahl's book to life in a way that you just couldn't do with practical effects or practical sets in this early 70s, or that they didn't have the budget for. I love that the Chocolate River actually looks like it's made of chocolate. The songs are catchy as hell. The visuals are amazing. I don't really like the Willy Wonka here. Gene Wilder is always going to be better, but I don't hate it. Or I don't even dislike it. Moving on. Corpse Bride. I'm gonna go with classic Burton on this one. I love this movie. I really, really dig how it's like The Nightmare Before Christmas, but actually Tim Burton, co-directing. And I love how at its core, it's a remake of his short film Vincent, and it just deals with this idea that, again, the scathing social satire that we spend all our lives worrying about what other people think of us, and it's only in the land of the dead that people are actually vibrant and people are actually creative and interesting and fun, and they actually want to live. I think that's such an interesting way to look at it, and I almost wish this movie was longer, but in a way I don't, because it's kind of perfect just the way that it is. The only reason I don't rank it higher is the songs are just okay. I don't love them as much as, ironically, I love the songs from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but more of this movie works for me than doesn't. Moving on. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. So at this point, we are well into the Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter era, where every single movie he does is involving at least one of them. I love musicals. I don't know if you know that, but I do. And I love murder. And this is kind of the perfect one. Now, I will admit I was not a fan, or not that I wasn't a fan, I had never seen Sweeney Todd. I had heard of it because of watching Jersey Girl, but I was not really that aware of it or knew that much about it before I saw the movie. That being said, I think I gotta put it up here in Masterpiece, only because it is. I have since seen a production of it, and this is the perfect adaptation of it because as much as you can do with on stage, you could go a little bit further here with the blood and the violence, and I think it blends it perfectly. Johnny Depp, I think I never heard him sing before, neither had anyone else. Stephen Sondheim apparently had a condition in the contract that he had final veto or final say on casting. And when he heard Johnny Depp sing, he was all for it because he doesn't have like an opera voice or anything, but he has the exact kind of voice you would expect a murderous barber to have. The songs are great, and it just feels like the perfect screen adaptation of that story. And maybe I'm biased because I really like musicals, but I'm putting it where I put it, and there's nothing you can say that will change my mind. All right, moving on. Alice in Wonderland. What are you doing, Tim? What are you doing? Everything in this movie is green screen, and I hate it. I hate how awful everything looks in it. They hadn't perfected the CGI yet. It just looks fake, and this is the point where I'm starting to get tired of the Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter shtick, where it feels like they're just in the movie because they had to be in it. And out of all the weird, wacky, eccentric characters Johnny Depp has played for Tim Burton, the Mad Hatter annoys me the most because it just feels like he's being crazy for the sake of being crazy, and it doesn't feel like there's any real substance to it. It's the biggest cash grab. I hate the fact that this is his highest grossing movie. This is the only Tim Burton movie to ever cross $1 billion. And I hate it. My wife loves this movie, and she's gonna hate the fact that I'm saying all this about it. But I'm sorry, sweetie. It's my least favorite. It's What Are You Doing, Tim? Moving on. So the less we talk about his Alice in Wonderland, the better. Dark Shadows. I'm gonna put it in here. I like it, but I don't love it. Definitely an improvement over Alice in Wonderland. I think Johnny Depp fits better in this world than he does in Alice in Wonderland. I think Helena Bonham Carter fits better here. It's weird that he's doing a British accent and she's doing an American accent. Most impressive of all, I think, is Ava Green, who is a native French speaker, doing a different American accent while speaking English. That being said, full disclosure, I have not ever watched the original Dark Shadows, so I'm only judging this movie on its own. It's fun. I like its vibes. I like some of its ideas. I again, it's got the fun kind of social satire about, this fish out of water all these hundreds of years later as a vampire. It just, there's something about it that just doesn't add up for me. Almost like I feel like by this point, Burton is kind of getting tired and the shtick is wearing off. And this officially ends the Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter era because this is the last movie that either of them do with him. Depp kind of went on and did his own thing and got into some issues of his own, which I'm not going to get into here. If you Google it, and then he breaks up with Helena Bonham Carter in 2014. So this marks the end of that era and the beginning of a mini era I'm calling the Ava Green era, which he never dated her, but she does appear in a few of his movies like back to back to back that we'll get to. Moving on, Frankenweenie. I gotta go with classic Burton. I know that I put both of his stop motion animated movies here. I just feel like they work. He works in that style. I love that this is basically a retelling. I know it's a remake of, the Frankenweenie live action short film he made, which, by the way, got him fired by Disney. And then all these years later, they wanted to make a feature version of it. I love it as his tribute to old school 30s monster movies. The fact that it's in black and white, the fact that you really care for this boy who's lost his dog, the fact that Martin Landau gives my favorite performance ever, maybe even more so than his performance as Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood as the creepy science teacher that you think may have murdered somebody earlier in his life, but damn, are you going to go to him for science advice for the interest of discovery? So there's a lot I like about Frankenweenie, and I would love to see him do more stop motion animated movies because his style has no limits. There's no budgetary limits with practical effects, and there's no uncanny valley limits with using CGI. When everything's stop motion, everything looks like everything else and exists in the world that it's presenting. Moving on. Big Eyes. This one's tough. I want to put it in Masterpiece, but I feel like I already have too many movies in there, and I don't like it. If I put it in there, I'm putting it on the same level as Ed Wood. So I'm going to put it in Classic Burton just because I love it as a biopic, and I love that this was kind of his departure. He stopped working. This is his first movie in over a decade that neither Johnny Depp nor Helena Bonham Carter is in. And I love that he kind of goes back to basics and makes a quote unquote like normal movie set in the real world. It's just a straight up biopic, but his style comes through in the movie's themes. Um, I love that he apparently was already a fan of Margaret Keane and had actually commissioned her to do a piece for Lisa Marie when they were dating back in the 90s. So I feel like this is a story he had wanted to tell for a really long time. It's a fascinating story, and it very easily could have just been Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter. And I kind of like that it's Christoph Waltz and Amy Adams because they're both great in this movie. And this is the one that you almost might not know it's a Tim Burton movie. But I love that it is because it shows that he can do more than just the weird, quirky, over the top, surrealist style and kind of just make a movie set in the real world, but still have his ideas and themes come through in it. Moving on, we're now continuing the Ava Green era with Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Which, what are you doing, Tim? This was the era that like every young adult novel series was being made into a movie. They were all based. I mean, this was basically emo X-Men, and it just I don't care for it that much. It's a mess. I know fans of the book were disappointed that I know it leaves a lot out. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It has certain elements that like could work, but you can tell that it's trying to tell way too much story in not enough time. It rushes everything together, and it just you hear like, oh, Tim Burton's making like an adaptation of this book, and you would think it would be much better than the movie that we got. So, moving on, Dumbo, completing the Ava Green trilogy. I don't hate it, but there's a lot. I think this is the movie that made him want to quit being a director, and you can kind of see like the meddling where he's forced to kind of throw in all these storylines. He's forced to make, Colin Farrell's daughter as insufferable as possible, even though it doesn't fit at all with the tone of the rest of the movie. But you can see where he's trying to do something different, and I admire that. I admire that he tries. I do genuinely like Danny DeVito and Michael Keaton in this. I like that they're kind of reversed, and that like Danny DeVito's the good guy, Michael Keaton's the bad guy. So there's enough things I like about it, but just overall, as like this again, this was the era where Disney's doing a million live action remakes that were totally unnecessary. And while this one I admire it does things differently than the original. It's a very different movie, and that's the point. I don't think most of it works. Wednesday season 1. You guys are gonna hate me, but I don't hate it, but hear me out. Hear me out. You announced you're having Jenna Ortega play Wednesday Adams, and it feels like a perfect fit. She's got the stabby looking eyes. She has that deadpan look. She visually she looks like Wednesday Addams, and on paper it should work. The reason why it doesn't work is, number one, this series tries way too hard to be Harry Potter, where they're at this magical school, and like in a world where vampires and werewolves and sirens exist, how is the Addams family that unique or different? Why is Wednesday a fan of murder and like commits attempted murder, but then like is upset with her dad that maybe he committed murder? Where's the Gomez Adams that referred to his brother when someone said he was a lady killer as acquitted? Where's that sharp, satire of the all-American family? Once you introduce a world of supernatural beings where Wednesday's surrounded by all these other people, she's no longer the weird, unique one. I couldn't get behind the story, and it was a little too CW for me. Again, just not my taste, and I don't think it made a lot of sense. So hate me for it, but that's just how I feel. And finally, rounding out this list, his most recent movie, Beetlejuice. Don't hate me, but I like it, but I don't love it. And here's why. Here's what I genuinely love about it. Michael Keaton is amazing. He feels like no time has passed. He's just Beetlejuice. Catherine O'Hara is great. The visuals are amazing. It's all practical effects and stop motion, and it's refreshing to see that in an era when everything is just bad CGI. That being said, the story's a mess. Certain characters, like Monica Bellucci and Willem Dafoe, take them out of the movie. Nothing changes with the plot. They don't connect to it at all. And not Wednesday, Jenna Ortega's subplot feels a little too Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and like you can kind of see that coming from a mile away. So it feels less like a sequel and more just here's a fun Halloween holiday special with Beetlejuice. And as much fun as it is to watch, I can't pretend it holds a candle to the original. And while I like a lot of it, I just don't love it. Wow, that was a lot to unpack. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know kind of which ones do you agree with? Which ones am I wrong about? Please, if you want to argue, debate me, come at me in the comments, please do. I love a good discussion. I love hearing other people's opinions and why they like or don't like something that, I like or don't like. Let me know if you want me to do more tier rankings, if you thought that this was kind of a more fun way to do it. I do have another tier ranking video planned very, very soon for a certain, shall we say, unlucky holiday coming up in just a few days from the time this video is being released, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. But other than that, let me know if you want me to continue doing tier rankings, or if you prefer the more kind of numerical ones, worst to best. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up trapped in any of these movies, and, certain ones are worse than others to be trapped in. And as always, every day is Halloween.